Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pawel Lewicki. I'm the Associate Director of the European Studies Center at the University of Pittsburgh, and I would like to welcome you to our last lecture in our spring virtual lecture series here today. Our speaker today is Mr. Andrzej Ceglarz from Technical University in Munich. Andrzej is completing his PhD at the Bavarian School of Public Policy at the Technical University of Munich, dealing in his work with barriers and opportunities for successful energy transition and transition implementation in Europe, with a special focus given to Poland and Germany. He has academic and professional experience from universities and research entities in Poland, Germany, Italy, Slovenia, and Belgium. He also works at Renewable Grid Initiative, a unique collaboration of NGOs and TSOs from across Europe promoting sustainable grid development to enable the growth of renewables in line with the Paris Agreement. There are a lot of things I think that the audience don't know. What is a Paris Agreement, for example? But maybe you will explain that to us. The title of Andrzej's talk today is European Energy Transition, Development Pathways, Challenges and Opportunities. Let me just mention that you have the opportunity to ask questions. Please do so also when Andrzej is giving his talk through a Q&A box that you can see below in your app. And I will include these questions into a discussion that we're going to have after Mr. Ceglarz's talk. So without further ado, Andrzej, I'm handing over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this nice introduction. I'm going to share my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
And also in the presentation mode.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you for inviting me and having me for this lecture. Today I'm going to present the development of the European climate and energy policies throughout the years. Aiming at implementation of the energy transition. I'm going to discuss what are the current development pathways, what are the challenges, and how the European Union is addressing them, also in the context of the Russia's aggression on Ukraine since last year. And with this presentation, I wanted to combine two perspectives, one more academic, but also kind of professional that I'm dealing in my work, also showing how different technical aspects influence the energy transition implementation. So exactly. So this is what I actually explain with the plan of the presentation today, and why actually we should care about energy transition. What is energy transition? So in order to understand this topic, we should step back and think broader about climate change. That is a serious threat that is accelerating, that we are experiencing more severe and intense extreme weather events around the world. I'm sure that you are aware from the news headlines about flash floods, drought, tornadoes, storms around the world. But that was just last month when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published this latest report, the collection of knowledge that we know about climate change, summarizing what kind of effects climate change can bring. And these effects are huge. They are already impacting almost each sector of our life, including water availability and food production, our well-being and health. the way how we live and how we are interacting with nature. These impacts, climate change impacts, are unevenly distributed across the world, but also across the generations. And what did IPCC presented in their latest report is to how the climate change effects are going to impact different generations, how they are impacting the people born in the 1950s that are around 70 years old now, how they are impacting younger generation, and how they are going to what extent they are going to impact the people that are being born in the 20s and are going to be elderly towards end of this century. And what is what are the ways, what are the means to address the climate change? So one of the main sources and the reasons behind climate change is the emission of greenhouse gases, mostly carbon dioxide. Through the years, countries and developed economies have been producing and developing their industries, at the same time emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere because of the combustion of the fossil fuels. Currently, countries around the world are trying to reduce the greenhouse gases emissions in order to stop the global warming process to 1.5 degrees, maybe to 2.2 degrees Celsius until the end of this century. That's the goal that was internationally agreed with the Paris Agreement. But actually, the currently implemented policies and measures, they are bringing humanity towards the warming of 3.2 degrees Celsius, which will bring inevitable changes to many aspects of our lives. Since one of the easiest and the cheapest and feasible ways to address the greenhouse gases emissions, one of the mostly acknowledged mitigation options, is first of all to reduce the consumption, because once we reduce the way how we live, the way how we consume, it influences the production patterns. But still we need energy. Still we need energy to continue the way how we live. And one of the means of the ideas behind the implementation of the energy transition is to replace the plants or the infrastructure that is emitting greenhouse gases with other infrastructure based on renewable energy sources, solar and wind. And this is also what IPCC mentioned in their latest report, that these are the cheapest and most feasible mitigation options, how the energy sector could be changed or shall be changed within the next decades. So, who is responsible for the greenhouse gases? Who is responsible for the global warming process? Currently, and why actually this topic is important for the European Union. So, currently, the biggest greenhouse gases emitter in the world is China, that is responsible for more than 26% of global greenhouse gases emissions. The United States, they are responsible for more than 12%. And the European Union is on the 4th place, just behind India. But for many years, the European Union was the third emitter in the world. This 4th place is also the result of the Brexit and the United Kingdom not being the part of the European Union. But this is the situation that we are having today when it comes to the greenhouse gases emitters. But if we take a step back, and if we think historically who is responsible for greenhouse gases emissions, here the European Union is on the second place when we look on the cumulative greenhouse gases emissions since the Industrial Revolution started. On the first place, there is European Union, and what you can also see in this graph is a very fast and very rapid increase of the emissions from China, which basically started around 1970, 1980. Having said that, the European Union has developed one of the most ambitious climate and energy policies to address this problem, but it was not like that in the beginning. The responsibility of European Union in that matter is clear, but there were different phases during which the European climate and energy policies were developing. So climate change at the European agenda appeared already in the 1970s, but it's more as a part of its research policy. So already in 1970s, there were there was research, there were claims in the scientific community saying that if or the increased greenhouse gases emissions are contributing to climate change, but there was no political action taken that would address this problem. In the 90s, 80s, also with the growth of the overall global environmental movement, the EU called to stabilize the emissions by the year 2000 at the levels from 1990. But the European Union didn't specify how this should be achieved. There was a resolution by the European Parliament in 1986. The European Commission also published a communication, the European Council, their conclusions, but actually no specific actions were taken. It started in the 1990s. It started slowly evolving at the European level. Some regulatory and informational instruments have been implemented at the EU level, mostly related to energy efficiency labeling when it comes to house appliances, to see how effective are the devices that are being used at the household level. The European Union also made some voluntary agreements with car manufacturers. Also in the 1990s, the European Commission had an idea, came up with a proposal of introduction of carbon tax, but this attempt failed because of lack of support from specific and some of the member states. This situation, there was a window of opportunity that changed this situation. It was in 1997, where countries around the world identified the problem of global warming that caused by human activity and greenhouse gases emissions, and they met in Kyoto in Japan in 1997 and tried to and negotiated internationally the commitments of the greenhouse gases reduction in order to stop global warming. And the European Union, as a one voice, played a leading and important role in this international negotiations of 1997. And it was a booster also for the implementation of internal policies in the European Union. This was also caused because the United States didn't ratify the Kyoto Protocol, so actually the European Union could fill the role of a stronger leadership in the global terms. In the early 2000s, again, being encouraged by the Kyoto Protocol, there was and the commitment agreed in 1997 that by 2012 the European Union will reduce its greenhouse gases emissions by 8%, which was additionally reinforced by the burden sharing agreement from 1998 that introduced a mean of calculation how each of the member states should contribute to achieving the overall targets of 8%. So it was a fair contribution on each of the European Union's member states to achieving this overall target. This was reinforced by other pieces of legislation. First of them, energy performance of buildings from 2002, and I think the most famous European instrument, the emission trading system introduced in 2003, that actually allowed for calculation, but also of trading the emissions of the greenhouse gases between the member states. This push or the acceleration of development of climate and energy policies took place in 2008, 2009 with the final adoption, where the European Union started to think in the terms of the next decade. So what should happen after the commitment by 2012? What should be achieved afterwards? And in 2008, the EU's climate and energy package was adopted, and this package for the first time introduced famous 2020 targets, which refer to different aspects of climate and energy policies to be achieved by 2020. The first one is a 20% of the reduction of greenhouse gases emissions by 2020 in comparison to the levels from the 1990s. Second target is about the increase of energy efficiency to save 20% of the EU's energy consumption by this year. And the third target was about the renewable energy, so wind and solar. The 20% of this of the energy produced from renewable sources should be contributing to the overall energy consumption in the European Union. And these targets are important because this is a point of reference for the next political developments of the climate and energy policy realm in the European Union. At the beginning of the last decade, this internal push, this internal development slowed down. There was a slower pace of this policy's implementation because what started in 2008, 2009, there was, on the one hand, there was a push toward 2020 targets, but at the same time, the financial crisis started. And this is what dominated the political agenda at the beginning of 2000. At the same time, the leading European role in global negotiations at the climate conference in Copenhagen didn't go well, and the objectives to be achieved during this conference were not realized, what was very disappointing. So the internal dynamics of the climate and energy ambitions at the EU level went down. And this was reflected a few years later, 2014, when another package or another, let's say, framework on the medium targets, climate and energy medium targets by 2030 was agreed at the European level. These targets were higher than those agreed before 2008. And this time they referred to the reduction of greenhouse gases emissions by at least 40%, by the increase of the energy efficiency to at least 27%, and at least 27% of renewable energy in total energy consumption. So as you can imagine, these targets were not very ambitious, considering that there was another decade foreseen. And especially in energy efficiency and renewables targets, the increase was only by 7% within the decade between 2020 and 2030. So for many countries, for many actors and some countries, this framework was considered as disappointing. Political momentum came 1 year later with another climate conference in Paris that was finalized with the Paris Agreement. It was a huge success in terms of global climate policy, because more than 190 countries, they signed the Paris Agreement, committing themselves to reduce the greenhouse gases emissions, to lead the global warming trajectory towards 2 degrees Celsius and ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius, which would allow people to adapt to the changing climate. The European Union played a leading role in this global negotiations, what also brought a new internal dynamics into the European Union. One of these signs was the communication, which outlined the vision to make European Union the first climate neutral entity by 2050. It also concluded with a publication of the so-called Clean Energy for All European package in 2019, which next to the governance regulation that tried to regulate and outline the rules how the climate and energy targets shall be implemented and shared among the countries, it again increased the energy efficiency and renewable energy targets by 2030 to higher levels. So within 5 years, 4 or 5 years, there was another increase considering energy efficiency from 27% to 32.5%, and renewable energy from 27 to 32. 2019 brought European elections and a new package announced for the so-called European Green Deal. And this historical overview, I will finish here, and now I will move to the recent developments at the European level, because in the last 2-3 years there was a huge acceleration when it comes to climate action, to climate policies and energy policies in Europe. So in 2020, with the new commission after the elections, during which the European citizens, they gave the huge mandate to many progressive politicians to the European Parliament, aiming to progress with climate action, but also express the overall European support to take climate action. And the new commission published the European Green Deal, that was a set of policy initiatives aiming at delivering climate neutrality, that was so far mentioned only as a vision by 2050. This is a very comprehensive and complex set of policy initiatives that goes beyond climate and energy, but also addresses other sectors like agriculture and farming, industrial production, that also takes into account nature and biodiversity, thinks in terms of funding, research and innovation, trying to streamline the climate and energy policies across different fields and stimulate the overall European development for the next decades. The European Green Deal also, what was very innovative and also brought some push for climate action, was a proposal for a European climate law to make this commitment of becoming climate neutral by 2050 legally binding. But also what happened additionally, what happened in 2020 was the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, which stopped a lot of processes around the world, including Europe, including energy transition. And the response to this crisis by the European Union was reflected in recovery and resilience funds. And that brought additional dynamics to the energy transition and climate and energy policies, because member states were obliged to invest a specific percentage of the recovery and resilience support money from the European Union to allow for green and digital transition. What happened in the next year, we observed additional acceleration in 2022. So as the European Green Deal proposed the European climate law, in June 2021, this came into force, making legally enshrined medium and long-term targets from greenhouse gases reduction. So the target of at least 30% of greenhouse gases emission reduction by 2030, that was agreed in 2040, was increased to at least 55%. So a significant increase, at the same time making binding for the European Union to make this target realized. The same climate neutrality target by 2050 became legally enshrined for the European Union, at the same time indicating or announcing that there should be an indication of greenhouse gases emission reduction targets by 2040. So it became of a part of the European legislation in 2021, in June 2021, to achieve climate neutrality. Just 1 month later, what happened in the European Union, there was a publication and another push for increased climate and energy ambitions. Another package of legislative proposal was published, which was called Fit for 55 package, and it included different regulations that should contribute to the European climate law and making the target of 55% greenhouse gases emission reduction possible. Also, considering that this increased targets of 50% should be realized only within 9 years, so from 2021 until 2030. And this Fit for 55 package, again, addressed many different aspects, many different sectors, as you can see here in this slide, including also entering different policy fields like social policy, introducing a social climate fund, trying to go outside of the borders of the European Union, addressing carbon border adjustment mechanisms. But what was, again, interesting that the European Union did, especially in terms of the targets by 2030, is again an increase of the renewables targets from proposed 32% as agreed in 2019 to binding 40%. So again, a huge increase. And when it comes to energy efficiency targets, from at least 32.5% to binding 36%. So these targets, they were not agreed upon. That was only proposal, but it shows a trajectory that with all this development, and specifically in the recent years, the targets have been increased significantly almost every year. And we moved to 2022, and what happened? I think this is obvious for all of us. In February last year, Russia attacked Ukraine, and this event brought huge geopolitical consequences, but influenced also energy markets around the world. And also brought some implications for the European energy transition. With the Russia's aggression on Ukraine, the European Union responded with fierce reactions and economic sanctions against Russia. But what Russia did, Russia also cut natural gas supplies to Europe. And if you look on the data from 2021, the European Union imported 90% of its gas consumption, whereas Russia was responsible for more than 45% of the European gas consumption. But also Russia delivered many other fossil fuels to the EU. Just to share some numbers, the oil consumed in the Russian oil in the European Union accounted for 27% according to 2021 data, and 46% of coal imported from Russia. And again, what happened last year when it comes to this energy crisis? The European Union came up with another huge set of legislation that should address the geopolitical and the energy crisis caused by the Russian attack on Ukraine. In May 2022, the Repower EU plan was published with objectives to reduce dependence on Russian fossil fuels, especially gas, by 2027, protect customers from high energy prices that started to skyrocketing in many European countries, and deploy renewable energy again. How all these objectives should be achieved? European Union shared the ideas by diversifying supplies, so to import from different directions, including Norway, the US, Azerbaijan. The European Union encouraged to facilitated savings across industry and citizens, and at the same time pushing to accelerating with renewable energy development, which could actually replace the energy that was produced from the fossil fuels, especially from Russia. And again, that was reflected in proposed increased renewable target to be to account for 45% by 2030. So again, the huge increase, the proposition to achieve this goal only within 8 years. Some of the actors mentioned that such development is feasible, is easily feasible, that market trends show that 45% of renewables by 2030 is possible, is doable. Some of the actors not necessarily. Eventually, this target was agreed, was lowered down to 42.5% last, so 2 weeks ago. So that was about the target. This is what happened and how ambitious the European Union is. But what is actually how the implementation of these targets looks like? So it's easy to calculate and to reflect on the targets that have been realized, the objectives that have been realized by 2020, because it's the calculation of the data. And according to the calculations done by the European Environmental Agency, all the 2020 targets have been accomplished in the greenhouse gases emissions reduction accounted for 31% in comparison to 1990, which was a substantial overachievement of the 20% reduction target. But not all European member states, 21 out of 27, reached their national target reduction targets. Some of them, like Bulgaria, Finland, Germany, and Ireland, needed to buy the additional reductions on the target. But also, although the greenhouse gases reduction target was overachieved by 2020, this is not only because the ambitious climate policies that the European Union introduced. This is also caused by some externalities, including the coronavirus lockdowns in 2020, but also the collapsing or a breakdown of carbon intensive industry in Central and the European and Eastern European member states, as well as reunification of Germany, as all these emissions were calculated cumulatively. When it comes to a share of renewables, also 20% by 2020, this target was achieved, 21% of renewables, mostly due to electrification, including heating and cooling, and the electricity production in the renewable production in the electricity sector. And for many years, it was not sure, or actually the achievement of the energy efficiency target, there was a risk that it will not be actually obtained by 2020. But again, COVID-19 lockdowns substantially contributed to reduction of demand, of energy consumption, and this target was achieved. What does it mean for the future? So 2020 targets were achieved, but there are some other very ambitious targets. And what the current calculations show, and also what the European Environmental Agency is reporting, that the current pathway and the current policies that are being implemented by the European Union to achieve 55% of emissions reductions are insufficient. It goes both ways when it comes to the implementation policies that will allow for the increase of the targets, but also in international comparison based on a fair share, as historically the European Union is the second biggest emitter in the world. Considering the other targets, the European Environmental Agency reports that there is a huge need to continue with the renewables expansion and further savings on the demand side to keep the energy efficiency target. So although the 2020 targets are realized and more or less the European Union is on the road to implement 2030 targets, what are the challenges that the European Union is facing when it comes to the implementation process? So here I'm going to show you just very short snapshots of 3 of them. One related to governance of these policies, second to social technical challenges, and the third one to the social challenge. The first of them related to governance and partnerships, it refers to the internal dynamics of the policy-making process in the European Union, and which slowed down specific either policy targets, but also the instruments that would allow to implement it. There can be some internal misunderstanding between different directorate generals in the European Commission. For example, climate action and the Directorate General for Internal Market and Industry, but there's more disagreement between different European member states, how ambitious the European Union shall be. And there is a clear division between all the new member states, showing the East and West division when it comes to energy transition implementation. And in the literature, some colleagues are mentioning about two-speed decarbonization approaches. And 2 cases that are very representative to this division is Germany, that has been very ambitious and has been considered to be a leader when it comes to energy transition implementation, and Poland, that that in the past years was slowing down the European ambitions, but also not implementing much or not implementing ambitious climate policies internally. So maybe because I see that I'm running out of time, I will speed up a bit. But these are the graphs to show how this implementation, how these approaches look like actually when you have a look on the comparison between 2 countries. And throughout the years, there is an incremental increase, especially of renewable energy sources in both countries. It is much higher in Germany indeed, but at the same time, Germany is still using or producing a lot of its electricity from fossil fuels, the same as in Poland. And many of these misunderstandings of misinterpretation, they also block building partnerships and collaboration bilaterally, but also at the European level, that would allow for faster development of the European policies. This is what is the second challenge related to social technical aspects that I wanted to mention about. Here you can see actually the cover page of The Economist from last week, saying hack pylons, not trees. And I'm going to say a few words about the electricity grids, why The Economist put so much attention, and why we should hack pylons, not trees. I think that we should hack both. Is underlining the role of this infrastructure that would allow to implement the energy transition. But is it so? Actually, this is not the true. Actually, the European Union, there is a very fierce opposition to implement the electricity grids and other type of infrastructure, including wind and solar assets, which is related to multiple reasons stemming from the competition over land and different uses, competition over uses of the seas, considering very rapid development of offshore wind. The electricity grids are not welcome because of the landscape issues and nature and biodiversity protection. And why grids are so important? This is because of the design of the system. So electricity grids allow us to use the electricity that is being produced and the way how we work, how we function. And currently, this is our energy systems are still being built in a centralized way, including large conventional power plants. But what is going to happen with the energy transition is that there are going to be much more distributed renewable energy sources. And if we don't have grids, then we are not able to use the electricity produced. And last and but not least, the social challenge of just transition that actually raised a lot of discussion in Europe, but also globally, is about, while changing the design of the energy system that was based on fossil fuels, it means that many people and the entire social group will lose their jobs related to fossil fuel extraction. And that's why the energy transition has its social component. And the EU and member states are trying to address it. And a few concluding points before we move to Q&A session. So this presentation showed that the EU has developed the most advanced regulatory framework considering climate and energy policies globally, and the levels and the speed and pace of the implementation of these policies has been determined by both internal and external dynamics, either the negotiations at the global level when it comes to climate action, but also recently because of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. However, the levels of implementation of these policies are still insufficient to be in line with the Paris Agreement, and there are still many of challenges that are slowing down this implementation. So, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to Q&A session. And I will try to stop sharing my screen. Okay, this has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrzej, for this very rich and informative presentation. So I will just remind the participants about the possibility to ask questions and through a Q&A box, and I'll start the ball rolling. By my own question, I think on the slide number 20, I'm sorry about asking about numbers, but I was puzzled by the I have two questions. By the decrease of production of energy from wind in Germany in recent time, and then steep increase of energy production from renewables in Poland in I don't know, I think it was like last 3 or 5 years. Maybe can you say something about this? And then you mentioned that the global aspect of the EU policies emerged actually very recently. And I was surprised by that, because how can you think about, climate change, so to speak, only, on your own, within this contained space of European Union, whereas it's a very global issue. Maybe you can say something about, the global context of these current and more comparative, if you have, or if you can, comparative aspect of these policies. How does the EU looks like on the background of others within in the world or in the globe? Australia is, for example, like a huge producer, producing energy and coals, and China. So,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much for these questions. Maybe to address the first of your question. When it comes to Poland, indeed, in the last few years, there is acceleration of production of renewable energy, which is caused by the implementation of solar panels. This development and the boom for solar panels started around 2018, 2019, and it was stimulated by, on the one hand, decreasing costs of this technology, at the same time increasing prices of electricity domestically, what motivated people to invest into their own solar panels, and the third reason was also governmental support policies to buy this infrastructure and to buy solar panels easily to be installed on the rooftops. When it comes to Germany and then the wind power development, so still Germany is developing quite substantial numbers of wind power, but this is indeed slowed down and is caused by two main reasons. The first one is related to public opposition and social acceptance aspects, which cause delays in the implementation. Second, it's about the it's because of the permitting procedures. And also what is related to that, the lacking resources, administrative resources at the level of the permitting authorities to deal with the documentation needed to build such infrastructure. So these are two main reasons for that. When it comes to your second question about the global comparison, do you mean here the ambition levels of greenhouse gases reduction, or
yeah, so, but also general. I mean, we're in the United States, so maybe you can draw some comparisons or connections.
Yeah. So when it comes to greenhouse gases emission reductions globally, there are not many, so to say, leaders. So no one is actually on the proper pathway to achieve the goal of the Paris Agreement. What is actually visible when it is are the investments in renewable energy. And here in a global comparison, there's China substantially contributing to the levels of global investments, and the United States are on the second place. And especially last year, there was a huge push in China to invest into renewable energy, and I think that this is also a recent data from this week, that because of this incredibly huge push in China for the levels of, let's say, carbon emissions from electricity production globally went down. They reached the lowest level in history because China started investing massively into renewable energy capacities. So also the conclusion out of that is, if China doesn't do enough to combat climate change, then the world will not manage without action on the Chinese side.
So would you say that Europe, because Europe often sees itself and want to be seen as being a leader in climate policies, reduction of greenhouse gas emission, energy efficiency, or increase of our energy efficiency, and stuff like that. Would you say that this image and self-image reflects the reality?
I would say still yes. I would say that the general yes, because the European Union takes the leading role when it comes to global negotiations and increase of the ambitions. Of course, I would say that maybe the motivation is different than of other countries. Definitely, if we look globally, there are alliances of small islands that are seriously threatened by the effects of physically threatened by the effects of climate change, and they are very much motivated during the climate summits to increase the international targets, but do not have enough power to push. But when it comes to the European Union's potential, I would say that it still can be seen as a leader, but with insufficient internal policies to be in line with the Paris Agreement. So there is a bit of discrepancy, which also stems from the, let's say, reasons why European Union is pushing for such objectives. On the one hand, they are purely normative, so there is climate change, which is a fact, and as a global community should address this problem. But at the same time, there is a part of industrial policy, and this is not only normatively driven action, but also a bit it's an action that also could protect the internal markets and global competition. So I would say it goes both ways.
So my conclusion would be that it's easier to demand from others, but not from yourself. I'm not sure if that's a very good picture of the European Union. Well, I'm sorry we have to stop, and I'm sorry about ending this with such a critical comment. But this is also what we're trying to do. I mean, not commenting or criticizing the European Union per se, but asking questions and looking deeper into the policies that are developed within the European Union that do have global impact. Andrzej, we're running out of time. Thank you very much for this very informative lecture. Thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you for these insights into European climate policies. To everyone else, thank you also for, I forgot to add, the recording of this lecture series is available at our webpage. Please visit our webpage to check our previous lectures. Yes, thank you very much to everyone. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in a year time. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Goodbye.